Imagine someone walking blindfolded through total darkness, no map, no voice, no sense of direction. And still, that person keeps moving, one step after another, even without seeing a thing, even without knowing if they'll ever reach the destination. Why? Or consider this: thousands of people throughout history have given up everything. They endured prisons, persecutions, humiliation, even death, all for one reason alone: faith. But what is faith really? A collective illusion? An emotional crutch? Or is there something truly real behind this invisible force that has driven people for thousands of years? Maybe you think faith is just for the religious. Maybe you believe only the deeply spiritual have it. Maybe you assume faith is born when life is going smoothly. But what if it's the exact opposite? Today, in a world flooded with evidence, logic, and instant gratification, talking about faith can sound old-fashioned. But maybe, just maybe, it's exactly now that faith is needed more than ever. Because we're surrounded by uncertainties, unanswered questions, and pain that defies explanation. And it's in that very context that one timeless question rises again. After all, what is faith? In this video, we'll take you on a profound journey. We'll explore ancient writings, scientific findings, historical testimonies, and mysteries that stretch across the centuries. We'll unravel what you thought you understood, and maybe piece together something far more authentic. And in the end, you may discover that faith was never about seeing what's outside. It's about listening to what still stirs deep within. It sustained martyrs in the Colosseum as they waited for the lions, traveled through centuries hidden within catacombs, was written on papyrus scrolls under persecution, sung in hymns while bonfires were lit in public squares, wielded by reformers who defied entire empires, whispered by slaves in the dark holds of slave ships, murmured by terminally ill patients in hospitals with no cure, declared by children in war zones, invoked by mothers standing before sealed coffins, undefeated even in silence and even in the face of unbearable pain. Still, it was called strength. Still, it was called faith. But what is it really? What is this invisible force that seems to defy time, logic, and human suffering? What exactly did these people see, feel, or understand that made them refuse to give up, even when everything around them screamed that they should? What kind of power convinces someone to lay down their life without any promise of return, as if the certainty they held on to lived in a place that couldn't be touched or measured or explained, only believed? The Bible describes faith not as a theory, but as substance, as evidence of things unseen, and this isn't poetic language, it's a declaration, a statement of reality. Hebrews 11:1 says that faith is the assurance of what we hope for and the conviction of what we do not see. But how can something invisible be evidence of anything? As if something intangible could be stronger than solid ground, more real than what the eyes can see, more trustworthy than the human senses. Doesn't that create a tension, a fundamental paradox? Because faith isn't simply an emotional choice, nor a cultural belief. It's something that drives radical decisions, transforms destinies, and according to the records, even parts seas and shuts the mouths of lions. Throughout history, men and women have died solely based on faith, without any empirical evidence, without immediate answers, without rational logic, and yet they died singing, praying, smiling. Why? What did they see? What did they know that we still haven't grasped? Or was there something else, something beyond the visible that truly sustained them from within? Something real that science has yet to develop the tools to detect or measure? And when science does attempt to observe or study faith, what does it actually see? What does it measure? What does it uncover? Neuroscience studies reveal that faith activates very specific regions of the brain related to hope, empathy, endurance to pain, and even survival under extreme conditions. But does that explain everything? Or is it merely revealing the effect of something far greater, something acting deeply within the mind's architecture, yet whose origin remains outside the scope of any laboratory? According to science, faith produces real and measurable biological effects. It reduces stress levels, boosts immune response, increases feelings of purpose and connection. But are those effects the actual essence of faith, or merely its shadow? And why does faith appear with such overwhelming intensity exactly where resources are lacking, where everything is missing, where despair dominates the landscape? Why does it shine brightest in the midst of darkness? Why does it grow stronger among the poor, the persecuted, the afflicted, the silenced, the wronged? Why does it seem immune to every system, every regime, every form of violence, as if nothing in this world is truly capable of extinguishing it completely? Faith has outlasted wars, inquisitions, ridicule, science, philosophies, harsh criticism, and even religions that tried to control it, institutionalize it, or bend it for their own gain. But still, faith escapes. It slips away, reappears, is reborn, and always finds someone willing to carry it with strength, even without fully understanding, even with doubts, even with fear. That's the central question. Why is it that in the absence of solid evidence, some people believe with more certainty than those who claim to see with their own eyes? What sustains that kind of conviction, as if the unseen became more real than what's visible, as if the soul could perceive what the eyes never will? That's where the phenomenon begins, where the true mystery lives, because faith isn't the absence of doubt, it's the choice to continue in spite of it. It's walking through darkness with the steadiness of someone who sees the light. It's trusting when everything says not to. It's believing when even God seems silent. It's saying yes to something no one can prove or promise, and still something within the believer says it's true, says it matters, says it's real. If faith is a phenomenon as ancient as humanity itself, then where exactly did it begin? What do the oldest records reveal about its origins and deeper meaning? Where did the earliest humans learn to place trust in something they could not see, and what inspired such complete surrender to an invisible voice? In the biblical text, the first major reference to faith appears in Genesis 15, when God makes an unbelievable promise to an elderly man named Abram that his descendants would be as countless as the stars in the sky, even though he had no children, and his body was well advanced in age. And yet the text says that Abram believed the Lord, and it was credited to him as righteousness. That means his faith was seen as something so significant that it was counted as righteousness before God. This isn't just a poetic expression, it's a foundational concept in the relationship between God and humanity, the very starting point of the divine covenant. This idea is echoed and expanded upon in Hebrews 11, the famous chapter known as the Hall of Faith, where multiple biblical figures are remembered not for what they visibly accomplished, but for what they believed in, even when no evidence could support it. Noah built an ark without ever having seen rain. Moses abandoned the splendor of Egypt for a distant promise. Abraham walked forward without even knowing where he was going. All of them were affirmed for something that historians still struggle to fully explain. A deep, quiet, unshakable conviction that drove them to act against all reason. But faith is not exclusive to the Judeo-Christian tradition. Apocryphal texts, like the Book of Enoch widely used among Jews of the Second Temple period, also speak of a heavenly trust, of men who pleased God through their unseen faithfulness, of an unwritten covenant sealed within the heart. Archaeology has uncovered manuscripts and fragments that reinforce these ancient beliefs, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls found in Qumran, which reveal that faith was closely tied to obedience and the expectation of the fulfillment of divine promises. In the accounts of Josephus, the first-century Jewish historian, there are references to the strange behavior of the early Christians people who allowed themselves to be killed without resistance, who rejected idolatry with uncommon zeal, and who spoke with a bold confidence about a kingdom that could not be seen, something that he himself, as a rational observer, seemed unable to fully comprehend. And what about the letters of Paul, which appeared just a few decades after Christ, speaking of faith as the only path to justification, placing this concept above the law, above tradition, above rituals, declaring that the righteous will live by faith, a phrase that echoes from Habakkuk in the Old Testament, showing that this was not a new idea, but one that already pulsed in the deepest roots of the Hebrew people, a connection that reached beyond the visible, a trust in the character of God, even when everything around seemed to say otherwise. Scholars like F. Bruce, N.T. Wright, and Craig Keener point out that in Jewish culture, faith was never just belief. It was loyalty, active fidelity, a lived response to the divine voice. It wasn't some mystical concept floating in the air, but rather a real covenant with profound moral and existential implications. It was something that shaped behavior, guided choices, and altered the course of entire lives and communities. Archaeology also reveals ancient inscriptions found on ossuaries, walls, and inside synagogues, prayers of trust, vows, songs of longing and waiting, as if the people of God had always lived in that sacred tension between what was seen and what was hoped for, between a broken present and a promised future, between suffering and coming glory. And faith, in this context, was the bridge that connected both shores, the link between today's chaos and the future order promised by God. When one looks closely at these records and writings, what emerges is not a naive or blind kind of faith, but one built on promises made and fulfilled, on lived experiences, on a long, ongoing story of encounters with the invisible that left visible marks on the history of humankind. And perhaps that is exactly what connects the ancient past to our present moment. Faith as a continuous thread that stretches across time itself, linking entire generations who never saw, yet still believed, who didn't fully understand, yet still trusted, who never gave up, even when everything around them seemed completely lost. For centuries, it was believed that faith was a rare gift, something reserved only for special individuals, prophets, saints, apostles, or those who had experienced remarkable supernatural encounters. Many assumed that faith only appeared after a miracle, an audible voice from heaven, or a divine vision, as if it were merely the after effect of something extraordinary. But there is something few people realize, something that could entirely change the way we understand faith. Recent studies in neuroscience, comparative theology, and the psychology of religion are beginning to reveal that faith might not be born from the extraordinary, but from the ordinary, not from what is seen, but from what is lost, not from certainty, but from absence. And that changes everything, because we've always imagined faith as a response to something that convinces us. But what if it's the opposite? What if faith is the choice to keep going precisely when you are not convinced, when there's no clear answer? What if faith isn't the result, but the starting point? What if it isn't the outcome of a miracle, but rather the soil where the miracle is planted, nurtured, and sometimes never harvested? This is where a nearly forgotten detail in the biblical narrative becomes deeply important. A name that appears quietly in a genealogy, but carries one of the most powerful expressions of faith in all of Scripture. The name is Enosh, son of Seth, grandson of Adam. And in the brief verse of Genesis 4:26, there's an enigmatic line, "Then people began to call on the name of the Lord." That simple statement holds immense weight, because up to that point, there were no recorded miracles, no prophecies, no visible manifestations. There was only grief, death, loss. And in the middle of that silence, prayer emerged. Faith emerged. Faith did not arise from an appearance, it came out of absence. It was born in the vacuum, in the dark, in the middle of pain. And that changes everything. Because even today, we often wait to feel something before we believe. But they began to believe even when they felt nothing. They began calling on a name without knowing if that name would ever answer. That is faith in its rawest form, faith before theology, before tradition, before any written promise, before scripture, before organized worship, just a desperate cry into the void. And perhaps it's exactly this kind of primitive, unpolished faith that most closely resembles the kind we hold today. And here comes another twist, because we tend to think of faith as absolute certainty. But the original meaning of the word faith, whether in the Hebrew emuna or the Greek pistis, carries the idea of firmness, consistency, and loyalty far more than emotional conviction. In other words, faith is not a fleeting feeling that comes and goes. It's a stance toward life, a decision to stay grounded even when everything is falling apart. Science, too, is beginning to approach this deeper understanding. Studies from Oxford University have shown that the human brain is neurologically wired to believe even in environments completely lacking religious influence. It's as if the brain is built to hold on to unproven possibilities as a mechanism for survival. This directly challenges the modern assumption that faith is irrational, or worse, useless. In truth, faith is a vital part of human design. It is an anchor in the face of the unknown, a response not to explanation but to the very absence of it. And what can be said about Jesus, who even as the Son of God cried out from the cross, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" That cry may be one of the rawest, most honest declarations of faith ever recorded. It's not the cry of someone who lost belief. It's the voice of someone who, even in deep abandonment, still turns to God, still calls him "my God," still holds on to the bond, even when heaven is silent. In the end, is faith about absolute certainty or a connection that lasts even through doubt? Is believing about seeing the unseen or continuing to walk with blindfolded eyes? What if that is exactly what gives faith its power, its mystery, its undeniable truth? Not the absence of questions or struggle, but the choice to stay, to reach out, to trust even when nothing makes sense and no answer comes. If faith is not born from evidence but from absence, if it doesn't depend on what is seen but on what is hoped for, then everything changes, because we begin to understand that faith is not a reward for having seen, but a choice made even when nothing is visible. And this directly impacts how we read the Bible, how we relate to God, and how we face life itself. Because if faith is the beginning and not the end, if it is a seed and not a fruit, then our prayers no longer need immediate confirmations, our steps no longer require absolute certainty, and our walk with God no longer depends on constant signs, but on a quiet decision to keep going even when the heavens seem closed. This understanding changes how we view the biblical heroes, because now we admire them not just for the miracles they experienced, but for the courage to keep going even when they saw nothing. Because Abraham was not justified by the son who was born, but by the faith he had before the son existed. Because Moses was not recognized for crossing the sea, but for the decision to stand up and face Pharaoh before knowing whether the sea would part. Because the apostles were not transformed by the vision of the risen Jesus, but by the faith they held even when they saw him crucified. And that puts us on the same field as them, because we too live between promises and silence, between hope and reality, between the invisible and the now. From a personal perspective, this kind of faith one that doesn't depend on guarantees sets us free from the anxiety of trying to control everything, from the anguish of needing immediate answers, from the frustration of not witnessing miracles every day. Because now we understand that the real miracle is believing even when nothing happens, keeping the flame alive even when everything around feels cold, continuing to search even when nothing is found, loving God not for what he gives, but simply for who he is, even when he's silent, even when it feels like he's far away, and yet we still choose to trust. Scientifically, this shifts the view as well. Many have always demanded that faith prove itself, that God should show up, that miracles be recorded or verified. But now we begin to see that faith was never meant to prove anything. It was meant to sustain. It doesn't exist to answer all our questions, but to hold the heart steady while those questions remain unanswered. And maybe that's exactly what challenges the human mind the most. To trust without owning, to believe without controlling, to surrender without fully understanding, to hold on even when nothing makes sense. And when we look at today's world, a world driven by control, urgency, instant gratification, likes, proof, and results, faith stands out as a quiet rebellion, an alternative path, a narrow road walked without sight, where we remain even in doubt, where everything is risked on an invisible promise. And that's uncomfortable, even confusing, because it doesn't fit into modern patterns of logic and success. But maybe that's exactly why it's still alive, because it doesn't rely on external conditions, but on something planted deep within. A conviction that can't be explained, but holds firm anyway. A certainty that defies logic, yet somehow feels more real than anything else. This carries a deep message, maybe the most important of all. You don't have to feel faith to have it. You don't have to see to believe. You don't have to understand to trust. Faith isn't a gift for the strong, it's a shelter for the weak. It's not a privilege of saints, it's the refuge of the troubled. It's not a reward for knowledge, it's a path for the lost who still choose to walk step by step, even in darkness. Faith changes everything because it shifts how we see time, pain, and the silence of heaven. It shows that belief is not about certainty, but about love. A quiet vow that says, I will keep going even without sight, even without feeling, even without answers. And maybe, just maybe, that is the greatest kind of faith one can have. If faith doesn't rely on what we feel, if it isn't born from what we see, if it keeps going even when everything seems lost, then this truth reveals something deep about who we are. It shows that we were made to believe that within each person there's a spark that refuses to give in to chaos. A quiet force that insists on hoping even when the world says it's over. This kind of faith, one that survives pain, abandonment, waiting, this faith we stubbornly carry even when our eyes are filled with tears, proves that we weren't created to give up, but to move forward. We weren't designed to walk by sight, but by something greater, more intimate, more deeply rooted within. And if we truly understand that, then we also see that faith isn't meant for the easy days, but for the dark ones. It's not for when everything is clear, but for when everything collapses around us. That changes how we live spiritually, because we begin to realize that we don't need all the answers to be close to God, that we don't need to understand everything to be heard, that we can keep walking with Him even when everything in us wants to stop. Faith doesn't demand that we be strong. It only asks that we don't let go of His hand, even when we're trembling, even when we're afraid, even when we have no idea where we'll end up. This faith invites us to step out of the desperate need for control and into complete trust. It asks us to stop trying to manipulate God with conditional prayers and simply say, Lord, I'm here. I don't know what will happen, but I trust you. Perhaps this is the most honest prayer we can offer, the purest form of surrender, the most sincere declaration, because faith isn't about mastering God. It's about fully depending on Him. It's not about demanding answers, but about resting peacefully even without them. It's not about predicting every step, but about trusting Him as He leads us through uncertainty. Now that we truly understand this, what will we do? Will we continue asking for signs, or will we learn to walk in quiet silence? Will we keep searching for proof, or will we learn to believe even when everything seems to say no? Maybe God is silent right now, not because He's absent, but because He's teaching you how to trust, inviting you to grow, to take a step without support, to live a faith that no longer depends on feelings, but on a firm and conscious decision. The truth is, at some point every one of us reaches the edge, where answers disappear and deep silence takes over. And it is there, in that very place, that the truest, deepest faith appears. When nothing else works, when no one understands, and when all logic fails, that faith rises up, a faith that holds you, comforts you, and guides you. A faith that doesn't need to prove anything, it simply remains. Steady, quiet, unshaken. Maybe you're hearing all this and feeling like your faith is weak, small, or flawed. But the kind of faith that truly matters to God isn't perfect. It's the faith that keeps going, the faith that endures, the faith that quietly says, I still believe, even when everything around you shouts that it's over. And that faith is more than enough for Him. Because the faith that pleases God isn't the faith of mighty heroes, but the faith of humble children who keep trying, even when they stumble, even when they're exhausted, even when silence fills their hearts. So today, standing before this truth, the real question isn't whether you have enough faith, but whether you're willing to take one more step, even if it's small, even if it's in complete darkness, even if it still hurts deep inside. Because it's in that one step that faith grows stronger. It's in that brave decision that the soul matures, and it's at that exact moment that God moves. Not when you have all the answers, but when you keep trusting despite not understanding anything. After all, perhaps the greatest demonstration of faith isn't about moving mountains, but about choosing to keep walking forward even when those mountains remain solid, enormous, seemingly impossible to overcome. And still, you choose to believe with all your heart that they will someday fall. After everything we've seen and experienced, perhaps the greatest discovery is this. Faith is not a ready-made answer. It's not a formula, nor simply the result of a miracle. Faith is the start of a long and challenging journey. It doesn't come from certainty or full understanding, but from the choice to keep going even when nothing around you makes sense. Faith endures when answers don't come. It remains firm when silence lasts. It's what keeps you standing when everything has fallen apart. We no longer need to search for faith in the wrong places. It isn't found only in temples, strong emotions, or elegant words. Faith is in the heart that won't give up, in the soul that persists, in the quiet voice that still dares to pray. It lives within you when you decide to take one more step, even when tired. It's part of your story, marked by falls and new beginnings, and that strength to try again. Faith is the language of those who believe God is working, even when all is silent. Perhaps this is the deepest lesson. Faith isn't about feeling it all the time. It's about choosing to follow, no matter what. Now look at your life. Think about the areas where everything feels dark, without direction or guarantees. And ask yourself honestly, isn't that exactly where faith is quietly trying to be born?